us to get started.
Let's do it.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at, not really here at the Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum, but for joining the museum for our History at Home series. Through the History at Home series, we aim to bring a diverse array of voices to dig into history from different perspectives. So far, we've had really great speakers, and I'm so excited to have these two lovely speakers here tonight as well. Just before we get started, I'd like to do a quick land acknowledgement. The museum recognizes that we are guests here on this land, historically Ute territory. We acknowledge that the mining and ranching community that established itself at the end of the 1800s was at the expense of the Uncompahgre Ute and the Tabawatch Ute, who were forcibly removed from this area due to the Bruneau Treaty and the manipulation that followed. We hope that you will take time to visit our neighbor, the Ute Museum, located in Montrose, Colorado, with exhibits developed in partnership with the Ute tribes by History Colorado, our state historic society. While we could never do this history justice, we do include information about Paleo Indians of the Gunnison Valley, the Ute people, the Bruneau Treaty, and the Los Pinos Indian Agency in our exhibits. The Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum knows that we have a great responsibility in representing many stories from our history, good and bad, and we continue to listen to those voices when they are ready to share. For everybody, this program is being recorded and will be available at crestedbuttemuseum.com, along with all the other programs that we've been doing through History at Home and everything we did before as well. We hope that you will consider becoming a member or making a donation to support this program and all the work we do here at the museum. You can do that by visiting our website at crestedbuttemuseum.com or by calling us at the museum. Now, today has been, if you live here in town, you all know that today has been a little bit of a strange day. We lost internet and cell phone coverage for the entire county and Hinsdale County as well, starting at 8:30 a.m. And it just popped on again at 6:30 p.m. So we were unsure if we were actually going to be holding this. And we had no way to communicate that with anybody at all. The only thing that's been working all day is radio. So I hope anybody who's living in town enjoyed the breakaway and got to go out and do some cross-country skiing or something. In the meantime, I'm a little less prepared than I would usually be. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Allie and Conor to introduce themselves. But before I do, I personally have to say, I've been with Allie and Conor through their whole making of this film, High Country, and I'm so proud of what they've created. I am just over the moon and astounded at this video, and I know how hard you guys have worked, and so it's a real thrill to see it, and I'm just so excited for you guys. It's just the coolest, and thank you for coming and joining us here tonight as well.
Thanks, Nell. Great to be here, or great to be attending the Zoom, rather. Yeah, it's from day one. You know, I think I reached out to Glow. Glow was one of the first people I spoke to about the idea to do a film about Crested Butte's history, and specifically the 60s and 70s. And she loved the idea, and then that was right during her transition from passing on the torch to Shelley and yourself. And so yeah, it's been really great to be have the museum involved literally from day one. You guys have been hugely supportive, and we really, really appreciate all your help. The film literally could not have been made without your support and resources. So thanks. Allie?
Yeah, so I think we'll start off, Conor and I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then Conor can tell you about him and about the concept for the film. So yeah, my name is Allie Batwin, and I have been working in media production for about 15 or 16 years now. I started in television production and then moved to different forms of media, like media installation design. And I also worked in documentaries, and now most recently commercial projects. So I met Conor almost 6 years ago now, and that's when this started. So we'll get more into that. But yeah, making a documentary about Crested Butte has been a dream of mine. I've been coming with my folks to Crested Butte for like 20 years, we have a condo in Skyland, and it's just my heart and soul is in Crested Butte. So I feel really, really lucky to have captured some history about it to share with the world. So Conor, how about you? Tell us about you.
Yeah. Allie and I met in Crested Butte. I usually am there every New Year's. My wife just walked in. So Allie and I met, I think it was one Christmas over at the Brick Oven in Crested Butte. I go there every New Year's because it's like a second home for me. I was born in Gunnison Hospital, lived in Crested Butte until age 3, and then moved down to Taos, New Mexico with my parents, Peter Hagen and Lynn Faulkner, who some of you might know. And I've been coming back to Crested Butte ever since. And to me, it's a really, really special place for me. And so years ago, I made a film about the Grand Traverse. And I guess I've always been drawn to making films about Crested Butte. This one was much larger undertaking. It took us almost 6 years to complete this film. And I guess I just have always been drawn to the place because it's so beautiful and the community is so lively and it's got such great stories and it's such a truly incredible place. So initially the idea for the film was inspired by the stories that I had heard growing up from my parents and all my parents' friends. I would hear these wild stories about what Crested Butte was like in the 70s. My folks moved there in 73. And as a kid, I just was enamored. I was in awe of these stories. And so I started to sort of think about what it would be to make a film about these stories from the old days. And ultimately, that idea turned into this film. The idea of recounting those stories sort of evolved into what the film is now, which is not just a recounting of stories, but really examining the community and the spirit of the community and the attempt to protect the town and the environment and the wilderness and the sort of conservationist spirit that arose in the 70s, and how that was also, influenced by the miners, the old timers who lived there before that. I think that's all for that.
Yeah, so Conor had this idea and it had been brewing for probably years, and I mean, since you were a kid, maybe, and came to me. We got introduced through a friend and we met at the Brick after a ski day, and I was just like, I'm in. Like, what can we do? We had never met before, had never worked together, and but I was psyched to help. So Conor and I have very complementary skills. So Conor is the director of the film and the editor, and he did a lot of filming, and I am the producer. So what that means is that I deal with budget and timeline and make sure that everything stays on track. So we both tackled fundraising because that is like the most grueling process. So even though we had our complementary skills of like Conor being very creative and very technical, and me being more like spreadsheet heavy, we both were like, well, in order to do this, we have to fundraise. And I think that because of both of our shared experiences in the film industry before this, we wanted to do it right. Like, we wanted to do it, if possible, with a full production team. And Conor had made films before. He does and can make a film just by himself. But it's always great to have more people with expertise to help if budget allows, right? So we decided to just go on a big fundraising mission, and the first step with that was partnering with the museum. So Glow and Shelley and Nell have been incredible But we were like, what does that look like? Like why, like we knew that the museum had lots of photos and archival imagery, but they provided so much more than just that to us. So they became our fiscal sponsor, which means that people could donate money to the museum, and the museum would then give it to us, and people could write it off as a tax deduction because the museum is a nonprofit. So when we were forming, our company is called Red Lady Films, and when we were forming that, we were trying to decide whether we should be a nonprofit or an LLC. And nonprofits, it takes a long time to establish that. I know some film companies that do that, but it takes a long time. You need a board, right? Like all that stuff. So what a lot of film companies do is partner with a nonprofit as this fiscal sponsorship. And Shelly was just game. She was just psyched to help us, and we figured it out, and they became our sponsor. So still to this day, you can donate to our film on the museum's website. And that was huge because that allowed us to tell all these individual donors, like, if you donate to us, you can write it off. And for big, donations, that's a huge deal. And as we found, the big donors, like the individual donors, were the bulk of the fundraising that we acquired. And we're so grateful to all of our donors because it really gave us that boost, to start us off. So after we got some individual donors, we then set up an Indiegogo campaign, which is a crowdfunding campaign. It's similar to Kickstarter, if you've heard of it, or GoFundMe. So the benefit of Indiegogo is that we set a goal, and if you reach that goal or not, you still receive all the funds. But with Kickstarter, if you set a goal of 10,000 and you only received 7,000, you don't get any of the money. It's just the way. I think it's supposed to be an incentivized thing, but we were not willing to take that risk. So we had must have been, I don't know, maybe 100 people donate through that campaign. And it could be $5, it could be $100, but we got lots of donations from that, and we're super grateful for those people. They're all featured at the end of our film. And then we just kept fundraising individually. But at some point, after about 2 years of fundraising, we were like, okay, let's begin. We got to start somewhere. We have some money. We can hire a camera guy, to shoot in addition to Conor, and let's start. So we did production over one summer. Was the bulk of the production, where we did, was it 50 interviews, Conor?
40.
40. So we interviewed a ton of people, and we just did it all over town. We did it in people's backyards. We did it in people's homes. And it was really fun. And then we did a lot of what's called B-roll. So that's all the additional footage in addition to interviews. So that's aerial footage. So you'll see we used drones, and we captured aerial footage, or that's close-ups of wildflowers, or we just had a really fun time capturing all of that. And then we did what's called pickup interviews. So then we took that footage, and Conor started editing, and then we did pickup interviews, which is we feel like we needed little parts of the story to be filled in. So then we'd go back to those people that had helped us the first time and did more interviews with them. And yeah, the whole editing process took several years. Conor, you want to talk a little bit about the post-production process?
Sure. Unless, Nell, you want to steer this somewhere in another direction.
No, you guys are doing great. Just let me know when to play the first clip.
Okay. Yeah, so post-production, editing, documentary is a massive undertaking. With a narrative film, a fiction film, you have a script, and you have everything sort of lined out for you when you're editing. You know what shot goes next, and it's all sequential. Editing a documentary is a completely different story. You need to you're working with an outline. You have a sort of a loose outline of what the story is going to be for the documentary, but what you need to do is sort of shape the story in the edit. So it really requires a ton of time going through every interview, every soundbite, and really taking the time to kind of sculpt it and mold it into a cohesive, comprehensive story that is also entertaining and compelling. So that was a huge process for Ali and I. We, I think, edited over the course of 2 years, and it's a strange time because you spend so much time. I spend so much time alone with the footage, and it's almost like you get to know these people intimately. Like I feel like during that time I got to know Tuck and George Sibley and Paul Anderson and all these people very well, because I was so acquainted with all these great anecdotes they were providing and all these stories they were telling about Crested Butte's history. And so yeah, the edit phase of the film was it's a huge undertaking, and it took us a lot of time. We then come up with a rough cut, and then we take that rough cut and we show it to a select group of people who I like to call my brain trust, people that I sort of creatively trust and look for feedback. And so yeah, it's a long process, but the reward at the end is, in my mind, is it's great. There's nothing like it. It's like building a house or something. You put all this time into it, and then you have this finished product, and you can show it to the world.
So then after all of that, we had so many different cuts and versions, and then after that was done, we brought on experts to help us finalize the piece. So that means a color correction person. So when you're shooting with different cameras, you end up having different color. The color's a little different, and you bring someone in to level all of the color out. And then one of the biggest things that we did was hire a composer to do original music for like 95% of the film. Music is a huge aspect of a film that often goes unnoticed. Like it's just, you kind of want it to be in the background, and you also want it to be impactful. And we worked with a composer who created everything from scratch. So that was really, I think the music makes a big difference. And that was another budget item that it was like, we could have just bought music. You can just buy tracks, but to have an original composer really takes a piece up in production value. So we were super grateful to have enough money to do that. And then also what he did was sound design. So Conor, tell us a little bit about the sound design in the film.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like Ali said, with editing and music and sound design, these are all art forms that, if they're done well, they should go unnoticed. The best editors, the best editing is when it's seamless and you don't notice it. And the same with music and sound design. These are all, if you do notice it, it's probably a bad thing. The music, we wanted to use music inspired from the era, from the 60s and 70s, in my mind, the greatest American music. And so we worked with this incredible composer, and he also did all the sound design. So, you go through the film multiple times, and we talk about sort of where, there should be nature sounds, or where there should be some sort of textural sounds. And then other moments where there's maybe, we have temp tracks. They're called temp tracks. So it's, maybe we had like a Crosby, Stills, Nash Young song in there. And then other moments we'd maybe had a Townes Van Sant song. And then we would say, okay, we want something like this. And then he'd spend the time to sort of create an original track based on what we had in there. So it's a really, really fun part of the process, because it's so, it's just, for me, music is everything. I think music can make or break a film. And so it was really, really a fun part of the whole process for me. And yeah, I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, so then once it was done, once we had the sound and the color, we wrapped it all together, and it was finally done after about 5 years. So yeah, I just wanted to tell a little bit about the process. We'll tell you more about the distribution after we play a few clips for you, but we first wanted to start with the trailer. Conor, want to just give a little bit of background on the trailer?
Sure. So, a trailer's supposed to be a tease. It's supposed to, capture people's attention and try and get people to watch the full film. So the trailer is about 2.5 minutes long, and we wanted to not tell the whole story in the trailer, but capture these sort of these little gems. And that's all.
In the mid-'60s, when I got here, I don't think I was the only one who felt like I'd come to some place that was different and perhaps special in some way.
The power of the environment here and the reality of it was compelling.
I think many people came here seeing this as an untapped secret.
All of us looked at far too many cowboy movies too when we were growing up.
Finding Crested Butte was like finding a lost civilization that the world had forgotten. Nobody knew it was there.
My first impression was I walked down Elk Avenue. There was nothing but coal dust. Everybody was black from the coal dust. Everybody. I said, where is this place?
It was a Wild West place. It was a frontier. It was like being on the fringe of civilization.
They were saying, we don't want to work on Wall Street, and we don't want to get rich, and we don't want to do this. So what do we want to do? Well, let's go up to the mountains and create a new society.
We didn't look upon ourselves really as crazies, except for skiing.
Here, community environment are one thing. We are not separate. The environment is the community is the environment.
We had just spent 2 years working to get wilderness designations. And all of a sudden, you wake up one morning and we're going to build a $3 billion mine right on the edge of town. Believe me, it created a serious upheaval.
We were a town of 500 people, and we were told that probably 8,000 people would be moving to the area. And it just blew us all away. And we were like, no way.
It was almost a religious devotion that I felt, and I think a lot of people felt. This was a sacred place. It still is.
Crested Butte for me is a microcosm of an American debate. I mean, who do we want to be?
I consider every tree here sacred, and we have to fight for it.
So there's the trailer. This is the COVID world we live in. It's got a little bit of a stutter and delay there, so apologies for that. But not easy to telecast the video over Zoom. But the day will come and we can all watch the trailer together in person and the entire film. Hopefully that day comes soon. But yeah, so we just wanted to sort of tease the film and yeah, that's all.
Yeah. So we have a couple more clips to show you guys from the film. The next one is a clip from the beginning of the film about the mining era. So I think what happened was Conor, wanted to focus on his parents' generation, which were called by Glow the mid-timers, right? They weren't the old-time miners, old-timers. They were like, and they're not the newcomers now, they're the mid-timers. So we knew we wanted to focus on that time, but as we dug more into the history, we felt like we had to just start from the mining time, not the beginning, because as Nell so well put, there was so much happening before the miners came, but the miners really paved the way for the community that exists today, we believe. So the next two clips will kind of show that, but this one, we didn't want to take up too much time. I mean, you could do a whole documentary about the miners, right? Like their stories are so interesting, how they got there and what they did and living in the harsh environment and their work. I mean, you could really dig in, and there was tons of archival imagery from the museum and from the state of Colorado. It was all really compelling, but we decided to just, put it into like an 8 or 9 minute section to just introduce this group of people that were so influential. So here's just a short clip from that section about the miners.
My first impression was I walked down Elk Avenue. There was nothing but coal dust. Everybody was black from the coal dust. Everybody.
I have tried to imagine what it must have been like living in Crested Butte when everybody in town was burning coal and in uninsulated buildings, where the only way to keep the place warm was to heat the stove to where it was glowing, literally glowing. And in addition to that, you had coke ovens cooking the impurities out of the coal. Where were those impurities going? Into the air along with everything else. They must have never seen the sun all winter.
It was an industrial mining town. And what made it so interesting, though, was that they imported the miners from Eastern Europe, and that they came in droves, and they came as family units and immigrated here.
Having traveled many times from Slavic countries and seen nothing of the world except being paid by the CF&I mining company to come directly here.
They came on the boat from Europe to New York City, got on the train in New York City, and got off the train in Crested.
They come from Serbia, Croatia,
Italy, the Austrian Empire. Had a lot of Italians.
Slovenia, Italy, could not speak the English language, were all Catholic, names like Mihelic and Saya and Krizmanich and Kapushin and so on. And they had to learn to be miners.
They had come through when basically coal mining was men going down with picks, shovels, black powder, and drills and attacking the coal.
Almost all of them had worked their entire lives in coal mines, from literally dark to dark, underground, dangerous conditions.
And it wasn't that they were hard workers because they were miners. They were hard workers because they were immigrants. And they came from places where it was truly difficult to survive. And they were willing to do whatever they had to survive. It's hard to fathom what that was like. It was incredibly hard and dangerous work. People died routinely.
You really never knew if your partner was going to come home at night or not. And they quite often did not.
So that section, as you can see, we really just wanted to explore that era before the mid-timers arrived. And, it's fascinating to me. These people came from Europe and they were immigrants, there's so much conversation these days about immigration, and back then it was a very similar story. People were coming over from Europe and seeking out work here in America. And so it's, it really you can't, in my mind, you can't really make a film about Crested Butte's history without exploring those pivotal times that, before the 60s and 70s, when Crested Butte sort of became more of what it is now. And I think that those mining days really were what, created the town that Crested Butte has become. There were these miners were admirable. They as you heard, they worked nonstop in the mines, and they were they endured these harsh winters, and it's a really fascinating time in Crested Butte history. And one thing I didn't know, but up at Irwin at one point there was a population of 5,000 people, which is shocking to me. Shelley and Nell, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but making this film and getting into all this, the mining history and everything, it's been so interesting. And it's almost, Ali and I, it's almost as if we're working for the museum to make this film. It's just intimately intertwined with their mission, and trying to preserve this history, the mining history, and then the subsequent generation after the miners. The miners had a really interesting relationship with the newcomers, the mid-timers who arrived in the 60s and 70s. A lot of people, there's different stories on what that relationship was like, but I'd say overall, in my research and making the film, it was generally a pretty positive relationship. There were certain miners that weren't welcoming of the newcomers, but I think for the most part, the newcomers and the miners really learned how to live serendipitously, and sort of work together to cultivate a community that worked for everyone. So that's a good segue into the next clip that we're going to show. Ali, is there anything you want to add on that clip?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's basically what we just learned. The relationship between the miners and the mid-timers or the newcomers at that time was really surprising. It was deeper than we thought. So this clip will give you a sense of that.
Moved there in 1970, there was still a big contingent of what we began to call the old timers, the people that had, been born there, grown up there, and lived there.
There were about maybe 150 to 200 families who were left.
It was never Neverland to us, but to them it was their home. And here were a bunch of hippies invading their home. So you can understand it was a little shocking to them.
We were different and young and intruding on their, Yugoslavian town.
When young folks were coming here and meeting a group of Americans who were, many of them still first-generation Americans, having arrived from overseas, immigrants who learned to love and make a home out of this place, they weren't so sure about the folks who were arriving. They weren't sure at all. But those who stayed were valued.
After a very few months, they could see that we were harmless, and gradually they invited us into their homes. We would go to their restaurants, of which there were only 2.
I think maybe some of them thought, well, you guys will come and go, but you won't stay. And we stayed and took on many of the attributes of their lives.
The nice thing about it is it created an interesting diversity here, which I think is part of the fabric of the town. that kind of infused the town with that history, because the new people came here embraced the old timers.
We newcomers saw them with a certain amount of amazement that they had lived here all that time, and we felt so young and inexperienced in that. So they became like mentors to us.
They taught us the core values of the town. And that was so critical to us because it was such a small community that we needed each other.
I think the Crested Butte community was so strong because when people came here, they came because somebody had come before them, which actually mirrors how the old timers or how the Crested Butte natives got here. They got here because a family member had been here and said, come here because there's work in the coal mines. It's a beautiful place.
This whole town was founded on immigrants. And so because of that, people came from other places and were able to make a living and make a home for their families. And I think it's the core of what America was founded on.
Community was not really a word that was in my vocabulary. The term entered my vocabulary because I was experiencing it.
Cool. So that gives you just a little taste. But we hope these clips have inspired you to see the film, and that's what I'll be telling you about now, is how you can see it. So we have, a very common thing in the documentary world is to apply for film festivals. They are a way to get the film seen by people, and with kind of minimal impact on us. So as the theme you may have picked up is just that budget has always been tight, and we were so grateful for all the budget that what we fundraised, but this has all been fundraised. We don't have any backer, we don't have a media company sponsoring this. It's just all on our own. So when we finished, we used most of the budget just to finish the film, and then it's well, now how do we get it seen, and how can we do that cheaply, because it can be really expensive. So applying to film festivals is the best way to do that. And we've applied to, how many do you think, Conor? 20 maybe?
Yeah, probably 15 at this point, 15, 20.
Yeah. So we're continuing to apply all the time, every month, a few more become available, and we're applying for them. But we've already been in 3 festivals. So we were in the Breckenridge Film Festival and the Crested Butte Film Festival. Woo-hoo! And right now we're in the Netherlands Film Festival. So Nell's gonna follow up with a link to where you can buy a ticket to the film through that festival. And we encourage you to go watch it if you haven't yet. We will keep everyone posted on what other film festivals we get into, because of COVID. They're all online now, which is pretty cool, because normally, you'd have to travel to the location to see it, and now anyone around the world can watch them. So we've been really excited about those festivals, and the goal for so with the festival thing, it's you can apply for a year, and then your content is considered you've already, not old, but you just already have applied, so you can't reapply. So what we'll do is we're figuring out what the next step is. After festivals, what do we do? And one dream of ours would be to be on PBS. So we're going to be applying for that. It's a long process, and it actually goes to the national PBS. It's not just, we can't just apply to the Rocky Mountain PBS, but we hope that they will choose it, and the film will be on there. And then, after COVID, when COVID and everything is safe, we plan on definitely doing an in-person screening, or several, in Crested Butte, and maybe beyond. So we're still formulating our plans. Right now we're in the film festival tour stage of our distribution, but we really do want to get it seen by as many people as possible. It's we put in all this effort for 6 years, and now it's time. So that's our plan for that. Conor, anything to add?
Yeah, we couldn't have chosen a worse time to release the film. COVID really, yeah, I mean, everyone. But that's okay. We're trying to make do, virtual film festivals. The one advantage of that is that potentially more people can see the film by streaming it online as opposed to attending the festivals in person. However, I'm a traditionalist in that sense, and I love to watch a film in a theater with other people. That's a really special experience for me. So but that day will come, at least for our own screenings that we organize. And yeah, that last section that we just watched, again, it really, to me, it was really interesting to see how these old miners who have come from, Croatia, Italy, all over, the way in which they sort of cultivated this community and then learned to live with these young progressive ski bums and hippies, if you will. And it was a really fascinating time in Crested Butte's history. And, a lot of people have talked about, in response to the film, about what Crested Butte's going through now, and it's in a lot of ways it's a very similar thing. It's a new generation, it's a new time for Crested Butte, and it's like back then, it's going through this sort of transition period, and so I think it's really important that people who live in Crested Butte, people who cherish Crested Butte, hold on to the values that make Crested Butte great and make Crested Butte what it is, and support the nonprofits and HICA and the museum, and just really, really work to keep in mind how important it is to protect and conserve that place, because it's a special place.
Cool. So I think we're ready to go to some Q&A now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Having watched you guys go through this whole process, I know that whenever you start digging into this kind of history, and especially out of the 1970s, there's so many things to learn about, because it was just kind of this explosion of activity that began to happen, and so much of it is tied, like you were saying, into those old timers and how they influenced the way the community was developing. So just to kick off the question section, and I should say, if you guys have any question, if any of our audience members have a question, please pop it in the Q&A or into the chat and we'll get it asked. But my question is, how in the world were you able to narrow down from the immense amount of stories I'm sure you guys heard?
Yeah, that was tough. Like I said earlier, we had 40 interviews. We had hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of footage. And it really was a matter of coming up with an outline ahead of time. Ali and I wrote a pretty, it's like a one-page outline on what we thought the story of the film should be. And then put together what's called an assembly cut. It's essentially a rough cut. And I think it was, I don't know, 2 hours long. And just sort of starting to sort of shape the narrative. And from there, you start to slowly trim and trim and trim and trim and trim until you have a really tight narrative. And Ali was instrumental in that, because I would get lost in the editing process, and I'd say, no, but this shot is beautiful, we can't lose this shot, or this soundbite is incredible, that has to stay. And she and others, Caroline, my wife, various others would say, no, it's just not, it's not important, it doesn't serve the story. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about serving the story. So it was just a matter of going through time and time again and trimming until you you really have a tight narrative.
So what was the hardest thing to cut out?
Oh man.
I think one thing is just that, like, you know, we asked some of the same questions and then some different questions. And we had, you know, having an answer to the same question many ways, it's hard to figure out which one we should use, right? Because like so many people in town can tell the history of Crested Butte and do it really well. So I think it was hard to figure out, like, you know, we wanted to have a representation of men and women. We wanted to have a representation of different characters in town. And so we were able to choose bites based on, you know, like on, you know, when you interview someone, it's sometimes hard to get the answer you want very succinctly, right? People just will go on and on and on. So that was one way to do it, is like, who said it in like 2 or 3 sentences, and then who said it very clearly. And there were some things you were looking for, right, Conor?
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's certain interviews and certain people, myself included, who are just not good on camera. And they just, you know, it doesn't work. Either the delivery or just, you know, certain things. And so, you know, we interviewed all these people, and it was a great experience interviewing these people and talking with them. But in order to serve the film, we couldn't include all 40 interviews. So it's really, yeah, it's figuring out who is really good on camera, who says it best in the sense of like the specific soundbite that we're looking for. And yeah, so apologies for anyone that got cut, but you know.
But we now have that oral history forever. It now
True.
exists. Yeah.
True. All those interviews exist.
Yeah, you guys created a massive historic archive.
It's true. I got hours and hours for you now.
Perfect. Now, one of the other challenges that I know you guys faced was finding a place to hold these interviews, because you staged quite a few of them over the 40-year reunion. So would you just talk a little bit about how you just had to make it work?
Yeah. I basically moved to Crested Butte for the month of August 3 years ago. And that was it. That was the time to just cram all the interviews. And it was just Allie really just scheduling with everyone, trying to arrange, okay, you know, where can we shoot where there's good light, it's quiet, you can't have any background noise, you know, you need, you know, a nice backdrop. So there's all these factors that go into getting a nice, you know, interview. And yeah, so 40 of those. Allie did a great job with that.
Yeah, I think that one thing that you don't think about when you're just watching a film is how much goes into that interview setup. So we had 2 cameras at each setup, and sometimes 3, and then also a ton of lighting, and then a whole sound system. So I'm sure for people who live in CB, like, you understand how actually downtown CB is not that quiet. Like the garbage truck, I guess we shot on garbage day like a lot. So even in CB, you know, it felt like there was like a helicopter, or, you know, so we did pretty well shooting outside of town. It was quieter. One of the coolest interview locations was inside the old plane. Conor, remind me of.
Yeah, there was, for the 40-year reunion, Sean Guerrero, he's an artist who lives over in Paonia and used to live in Crested Butte. He had this refurbished cab of a plane, an old army plane, I think, and we did a few interviews in the plane, which was really cool because it acted as a sound studio. There's probably 4 or 5 interviews in the film that are shot in there, and that was pretty cool. Yeah.
That, seeing you guys try to make that plane work was amazing, and it turned out to be a really cool backdrop. I saw it,
Yeah.
once I saw it in the movie, that was perfect.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Now, I heard I think it was your film festival interview with Michael, that you talked about how you set out originally to do a story kind of just about the weird zaniness and all the like legends of lore that you heard out of the 70s, but then it kind of morphed into this more of an environmental story. How did that end up coming about?
I think that it's hard to just make a film about various stories. There needs to be sort of a cohesive thread. You could just have anecdotes from various people, but that would feel more like an experimental film. And so I think Ali and I were trying to find what that sort of silver thread was that brought the film together. And we both care a lot about the environment, and the community of Crested Butte was fighting a lot for the environment back then. And I think that that just grabbed me because it's one of the most defining characteristics about Crested Butte history, specifically in the 60s and 70s, and what that generation was striving to accomplish was, the AMAX fight and protecting the surroundings, and that conservationist sort of environmentalist spirit really became a focal point, I'd say. So it seemed like the obvious story to tell, and also something that Ali and I both care about. So
Awesome. And we got a question from the chat. They really liked your use of animation in the film. Could you tell us more about that?
Ali, you want to take that?
Yeah, thanks for reminding us, Shelly, because that is one of the biggest pieces of post-production that we forgot to mention. So so when we were gathering all of the archival imagery, which we could not have done without Nell. Nell, huge shout out to you. I don't know if we've said this enough, like how integral both Shelly and Nell were to this, but Nell's like this archival imagery guru, and really put in a lot of hours with us to help us do this. So once we started gathering imagery, we realized that there wasn't a lot of moving imagery, right? Film from that time. And, we didn't want it to feel like a slideshow, which can happen because when your subject is, before film was really big, or, we did everything to try to find film. Like we reached out to so many people and it was just hard. So, okay, we have a lot of photos. How can we make it feel dynamic? And the best way to do that is through animation, motion graphics. So we hired an awesome animator who was able to add elements to the photos that make it feel like it's moving, even though it's not. So a few examples of that are like we have smoke coming out of a train car, and he just made the smoke, like he just built the smoke, and it gives it this flavor. I think we have like snow falling, and there's different elements that we added to make it feel just more alive. And we didn't want it to just feel like photo after photo. So that was one thing. Also just transitions, all of the titles, obviously we wanted them to feel very professional, and he did all of those for us. Conor, what else am I missing?
Well, we tried to sort of embrace the analog nature of these photos. Nell supplied us with literally thousands of archival images, and we wanted to embrace that sort of analog look. And so we didn't want something to feel too like cartoony or digitized. So we tried to achieve a look that just utilized that sort of analog photo, but then just kind of brought it to life subtly. And that was the goal there. And I think we achieved that.
And I guess one more thing is like the maps. So we really wanted to bring people into the place if they don't know where Crested Butte was, and graphics are a great way to show like on a map. And you know, we could have just put a map there, but we really wanted movement with the map. So he zooms in from like Colorado to Crested Butte, and that was really important to us. And that also just came down to budget. Like Conor can do some light graphics himself, but to have a real specialist was huge. We're grateful for that.
It made a huge difference. It definitely makes your film just stand out. It's really well done.
Thanks, Nell.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Is there any last things you'd like to talk about or mention or let the folks know?
Any other questions from the participants?
That's it at this moment.
Well, Allie?
I just say if you want to learn more about our film and our distribution plans, just follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or send us an email at redladyfilms@gmail.com, and we'll add you to our newsletter list, so you can hear of screenings in the future. We send them out, you know, once a month or once a quarter, depending on what's going on. And we hope that you'll join us for a screening in Crested Butte, hopefully next summer, but you know, it all depends.
Knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Thank you so much, Nell, for doing this, and Shelly and everyone at the museum. We're so grateful to be a part of this series you have.
Yeah. And the website for the film is thehighcountryfilm.com if you want to learn more about the film or stay tuned for virtual film festivals. And yeah, thank you to the museum for, again, you know, being so helpful and such a great resource in making this film. And it's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Well, I've popped a link to be able to go see their film at the Netherlands Film Festival. Is that correct? And also to be able to check out more information at thehighcountryfilm.com. I put that link in the chat for everybody as well. Be sure to check it all out. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this week at the History at Home that almost didn't happen, but the tech gods managed to get out to whatever disaster happened out near Montrose and hook us all back up to our internet and our cell phones, so we're all connected back to the earth, or to each other, I guess, after being connected to the earth, after away from it for a little while. Well, thank you all, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Nell.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.